they were. And we saw that all three types of teachings, we found some examples of them regarding the tefillin.
Is it going from the particular to the general, to the schools, or from the general to the particular, to the right?
That's one category. One category was things they derived from the midot, from the methods of exposition of the Torah. We mentioned how many? 13 of listed by Rabbi Ishmael. Good. That was one method. And we saw, for example, that they derived the tefillin go on the left hand, yadcha, the weaker hand, because the way the pasuk was written, with an extra hay at the end. Remember that? Okay, so that was one method of the oral law. Drasha, midrash. We saw also midrash halacha, tzedek tirdof. Remember, we saw an example of the rabbis learning something out from the specific wording of the verse. These are called midrash, and with the shloshes midot shatorah nidreshet bahem. That was only one type of thing that the rabbis were doing, though. That's actually quite creative, innovative. We believe that they had inspiration. And they're following the rules. God gave us the principles. We're supposed to mine the text for all of its various meanings. But there's something else they were doing, which is perhaps less creative, but very significant. And that, basically, we called it TT. We called it transmitted tradition. Right, the rabbis being part of that chain of tradition all the way back to Moshe Sinai. There was a category we said that has no anchor in the text. Just they transmitted it from Moshe to Yeshua, to the Zkenim, to the Nevi'im, etc., until it was written down in the halacha, in the Mishnah, wherever the oral law got written down. What was that called? It was called Halacha LeMoshe Misinai. Halacha LeMoshe Misinai, purely oral transmission. That was another category. And the first category that we learned there regarding the tefillin was transmitted tradition, but then the rabbis came and attached it to a verse. Right? We said the word totafot by tefillin. The rabbi said in some sort of far-fetched connection that tat means two, and pat in a different language means two, and so totafot means four. So we know there's four parts of the tefillin. But this essentially was transmitted tradition, that there's four parts to the tefillin, and then they attached it to the text. So in line number 2, categories of oral Torah, we have those three listed. Okay, Moshe, read them for us.
Explanations received and transmitted by Moshe relating to the text of the Torah. Halacha LeMoshe Sinai, laws transmitted orally, not based on text. Laws derived by interpretive rules. 13 midot. Okay, so those are the three types of things. Here they call them categories of oral law, the types of things that the rabbis did. And the rabbis of the period of, throughout, I guess, ever since Moshe to Sinai, there was transmission, but it really developed and became fleshed out and then got recorded in the period of the sages, okay, which is the green period. You see it on the board. We have, I remembered, by the way, afterwards, we have to add one more part to the board because we left out an event. It was a major event that appeared. The
destruction of the temple?
So we have that. The truth is, the destruction of the temple. Actually, we didn't. You're right.
We didn't put it in.
We didn't put it in because we were waiting for year 70. So we have to put in the destruction of the temple, and then what? 60 years later, Bar Kokhba revolt. Exactly. Yeah. So we have to put it's called the Great Revolt, the Great Rebellion. That's year 67, 60. Towards 70, and then the Bar Kokhba revolt. So we're going to have to do that a little soon. In any case, during this period, the period of Chazal, that these three the categories of oral law, they really became crystallized and developed. There's three more things that the rabbis do And that's what you see in the line. The three more categories. The rabbis also, they were not just transmitting laws from Moshe, they were not just interpreting the Torah, they also had very other significant roles. Ready? Gezerot. I'm continuing to read on that line after Moshe left off. David, you see where I am? Yisrael, do you see where we are in the page? Or you with us? Yeah? No? David, you want to show him where we're reading so he can... And Ravi, do you see where we're... Yeah? Gezerot are decrees enacted by the prophets and the sages to safeguard Torah laws. It's amazing. We know the prophets. Who can name me some of the prophets? Yeshayahu. Who else? Yirmiyahu. Who else? Ezekiel. Who else? Amos. Obadiah. Good. Okay, good. But go earlier. Shmuel was a prophet. David spoke to God. David, you should know that one, right? So all the prophets. So we know that their words are recorded in the Tanakh when God spoke to them, what they said, what they did. There's many stories about them.
By technicality, because Moshe was...
Of course, Moshe was the greatest of the prophets. Absolutely. The Torah says that explicitly, that of all the prophets, Moshe was not the first, because there were forefathers. Yes. But Moshe was the greatest of all prophets. Adam was a prophet, 100%. I actually have a list here of all the prophets that we have in our tradition. Amazing. From the time of Adam all the way down to the last of the prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, right? In the Second Temple era, at the beginning of the Second Temple period.
Quite profitable.
Ooh, Moshe. That would be a profitable list. I'll see if I have it here for you. I don't know if I photocopied it. But you know what? There's other things that the prophets did which were not written in the text. They were oral. For example, we have a tradition that the rabbinic law that you must do netilat yadayim, that every Jew before he eats bread has to wash his hands for bread, comes all the way back to Shlomo HaMelech. It doesn't say that in the Tanakh anywhere, but we have a tradition that this was an enactment, gezerah, decree, enacted by the prophet Shlomo. There's traditions regarding Eruv. You've heard of Eruv Tchumin, then Eruv Chatzerot regarding Shabbat, right? The perimeter around the city, how far you can go out. Sorry.
Second tractate of Moed.
Yafeh, good. How's it going?
Almost there.
Almost there.
I'm not confident enough to.
Okay, almost. Yes.
I have a question about washing the hands.
Okay.
I heard different ways you can do it. Some people, I do it 3 times right, 3 times left. I also hear that people are doing it just 1 time. When you say the bracha, you need to face to the direction of the kotel.
Wow.
So I'd like to ask you what...
Oh, that's a great question. The laws of Netilat Yadayim are very practical. We do it every day a number of times. And the truth is, the answer is, I can't answer you in one word. It's not a yes or no question, right? The truth is, there are different types of Netilat Yadayim. On the same day, we might do washing in the morning, and then we wash for bread, and then we wash when we come out of the bathroom, and we wash before tefillah, and these are 4 different, perhaps, types of Netilat Yadayim, and each have their own rules. And so I can't give you one answer. Briefly, I'll tell you what, that I think a lot of people don't appreciate, is that there's a difference between washing for bread and washing in the morning.
Of course.
It's not so simple, but a lot of people, so in the morning, the standard practice is to wash 3 times on alternating hands. Once on the right, once on the left. Once on the right, once on the left. Once on the right, once on the left. 3 times.
But before we do this, when we get up, before we go to the bathroom, we need to wash our hands starting on the left hand.
Interesting. I don't know a source for that, but
And then we go to the bathroom, and after when we come back to the bathroom, do it again, beginning the right hand.
I never heard this idea that you mentioned about starting on the left. I don't know about that. But and the truth is, really, the washing in the morning, there is room to do it more than once. But the classic idea is the washing in the morning is right after you get up, first thing in the morning. If you don't need to rush to the bathroom, then you do it. Some people have a washing cup right next to their bed. You've seen that?
Yeah.
Right. Some
Do you
people
want to
are.
do that?
I don't. At one point in my life, I did, but I
What
stopped.
is actually the reason for washing in the morning right after we wake up?
Okay, so I knew this was going to develop longer and longer. But it's important stuff. It's important stuff. There's no rush. Fundamentals. That's right. It's true. 3 reasons for washing the hands in the morning. One reason is the Rashba says, Shlomo ben Aderet, one of the Rishonim. He explained that the reason we must wash our hands in the morning is because every Jew is going to live his day as worshiping Hashem, and that's compared to the Kohen who serves in the Beit HaMikdash. And the Kohanim, whoever, before they did their service in the temple, they had to wash their hands. They also washed their feet, but nowadays we wear shoes more than, in the temple they didn't wear shoes. So washing, we don't, most people don't wash their feet in the first thing in the morning. But washing the hands, so he says, yeah, we pattern ourselves after the Kohanim. It's a beautiful idea. Start your day, you've got to wash your hands. Your day is going to be a day of service of Hashem. It's a beautiful idea. Second reason, the Rosh explains, Rosh Rabbeinu Asher, again, he was started off in Germany, and he became the chief rabbi of Spain in the 13th century. He explained the reason why, and they're both explaining the Talmud. The Talmud speaks about washing the hands. It doesn't really say explicitly why, but this is why we have different interpretations. The second interpretation is the Rosh. He explains that there's nothing to do with Kohanim and worship. It's very practical. If your hands get dirty, you have to have clean hands when you're saying a bracha or when you're serving Hashem. And so we assume that in the nighttime, your hands are always busy moving. Maybe they touched a dirty part of your body. Maybe they touched some private parts. Maybe they touched a sweaty part. And so we can assume that your hands are dirty. And so you have to wash your hands for cleanliness, for hygiene. And it's important to do that so that you can say a bracha, because you can't say a bracha when your hands are dirty. Yes?
I heard that many people during the night, when we possibly have dreams and thoughts, they could be not clean. And so when we get up, we need to clean our hands, and it means to clean all the bad things we had, the thinking, the feelings, and to get up and to be clean to start the day in holiness.
What has the feeling or the thought to do with your hands? Like hands are physical, thoughts are
right
in the mind.
I don't know, I have heard that.
So this brings us to the third reason. The third approach, as I told you, there's 3, right? The Rashba,
It's a Kabbalistic one. I know.
the Rosh, and the third idea is something mentioned in the Talmud, something called an evil spirit. It says that when you sleep at night, there is an evil spirit, which we know that your soul sort of. The Talmud says that sleep is 1/60th of death. It's sort of like your soul departs from you, or you're not fully conscious. It's not fully there with you. So if you don't have life and you have death, so you have the opposite of life. The opposite, and the death. Life is associated with goodness, and death is associated with evil forces. Forces of Tumah. What is Tumah? What is Tumah and Tahara in the Torah? There's ritual purity and impurity. So we don't say that it's hygiene. It's a spiritual idea. So there's this. The Talmud does say that when you're sleeping, there's a certain spiritual uncleanliness that devolves upon you. And then, when you wake up in the morning, Baruch Hashem, your soul comes back into your body, and you're back to life. And all those forces of evil, whatever they were, those spiritual evil forces, go away. They go away except for they concentrate in your fingernails. And that's the third reason why we wash our hands in the morning, to get the evil spirit away from the fingernails. And that's also why we do it 3 times on alternating hands, because our sages tell us that this is particularly... Sorry?
So no, because it jumps, like the evil spirit jumps from one to another.
Nah, I don't know if it jumps, but
I heard this. Like, somebody
I don't know, but
somebody explained like this.
yeah, this is metaphysics. This is spiritual stuff. This is not something that you can prove or something you can. But this is the third reason, and we follow all of the reasons. Just to be machmir, to be especially stringent, we follow the ramifications of all 3 reasons. So in the morning, that's why we do 3 alternating hands, just to make sure that although throughout the centuries, many great rabbis have said, we don't have that spiritual spirit anymore. That was maybe, it was around in the time of the Talmud, but we don't have it anymore. And yet, until today, if you're going to wash your hands anyways, for the other 2 reasons, might as well cover all of your bases, and we do the 3 alternating. And that's also the idea, so you do it the first thing, right, when you wake up in the morning, before you get out of bed, you're not allowed to touch any food, or touch any apertures, your mouth, your eyes, your ears, your nose, until you've done the Netilat Yadayim, because you might have that evil spirit in your fingernails, and it'll transfer, and it could cause damage. But again, this is the 3rd reason. We try to take care of all 3 reasons. If we're washing our hands anyways, do we know? Am I an expert on the spiritual evil spirits? I'm not a big expert on that. I don't know. But this is why I say in the morning, for those 3 reasons, we wash our hands, and it's best to do them alternating hands, and we try to do them as soon as possible after waking. Now, of course, it's complicated. Sometimes you have to rush to the bathroom, so you do it afterwards. You do it before. You do it as soon as you can. And then there's other reasons to wash your hands. Maybe when you touch your shoes, when you're getting dressed. So you have to wash your hands before you daven, because you've touched something dirty. So there's other times you wash your hands as well. But the first morning washing of the hands is for the 3 reasons, and we do it as soon as possible after waking. Then the other Netilat Yadayim that we're going to do later on is for only the other reasons of getting ready for prayers, like the Kohen. It's really ideal to wash your hands before each of the prayers, before Mincha and Ma'ariv too. You should wash your hands. But this is not usually associated with the evil spirit or any kind of metaphysics. It's just like the Rashba, like we said, the first reason, to prepare yourself for service of the Lord in the temple. We don't have a temple, but your davening is like the temple. So I hope that answers. Yeah.
Which brachot we need to say?
It's a good question. I'll answer that too. What's your question?
So, okay, is this like proper halakha that
Yes.
you see
Yes.
in the
Yes.
Talmud?
Absolutely. Yes.
The evil spirit?
Yes. Well, listen. The evil spirit is mentioned in the Talmud. The Talmud, there's lots of spiritual stuff. It's not all legal, and there's fascinating stuff. It's hard for us to figure it out. As I said, the Tosafot throughout the Middle Ages, they said we don't have what they had in the Talmud anymore. Times have changed, but there's different approaches. Some people have a leaning to the more mystical, and some people try to give me just the laws, not based on the mystical spiritual stuff, but we try to encompass all of the Jewish tradition, including those spiritual sides, and that's why we wash 3 times on either hand. And yes, the rabbis mandated this Netilat Yadayim in the morning, and so we say a bracha afterwards. Usually we say it together with the morning blessings in in the beginning of the prayer service, right? In the beginning of Shacharit, we say a list of blessings. So usually we say the Al Netilat Yadayim there. Then there's another type of Netilat Yadayim, also a Gezerah, an enactment made by the sages. And actually, it has earlier sources, even a tradition that it comes from the prophets, before the sages. Right? We're talking about 1,000 years earlier, before the period of the sages.
Or
The law that we must wash our hands before eating bread.
yes.
And there we also make a bracha on Netilat Yadayim. And but there, if there's no issue of evil spirits, the best way to do it, according to the halacha, is twice on the right hand and twice on the left hand. That's it. Not 3 times and not alternating. So everything you heard is right. It's just a question of putting it in the right context, in the right part of the day. And other than that, most people don't make a bracha on Netilat Yadayim. Some halachists, some poskim say, every time you go to the bathroom and you come out, you have to wash Netilat Yadayim with a bracha on Netilat Yadayim. Most of us don't say that. Most communities don't accept that law. We say a bracha for going out, when you come out of the bathroom, there's a special bracha, but not a Netilat Yadayim. That was not mandated. That's just to keep your hands clean. And that, only in the morning is there a bracha on Netilat Yadayim once, but the rest of the day, unless you're eating bread, there's no more Netilat Yadayim. Yeah.
Question is, every morning, wash the hand, the keeper, before wash the hands, can quick eat or after the washing?
But it's a good question. So when we mentioned before, you're not supposed to touch things before you wash your hands in the morning. So what about your clothes? The kippah is the good question. So really, you're not supposed to touch your clothes either. So maybe it's even better to wash your hands right next to your bed with a washing cup and a basin, even before you put on your kippah. Some people sleep with their kippah. That's it's a little bit of a trick how it doesn't fall off. But especially if you don't have any hair to attach it to. But ideally, I think most people would put on their kippah first, but there is a problem with touching things. Again, I don't think this is absolutely prohibited, but Netilat Yadayim should even come before you put on your kippah. Yeah, I think so. And you're not making a bracha right away, because probably you have to go to the bathroom. Probably you're going to get dressed. And as I said, usually we put off the bracha for the morning washing until you begin your prayers. When you say the list of the morning blessings, right? There's 15 blessings in a row, and before that you have the Netilat Yadayim, and the Asher Yatzar, and the Elokai Neshama, the Birkot HaTorah, the blessings of the Torah. You put it all together with the prayer service, and so you're not saying the bracha right away, but washing the hands you can do right away, even without putting on your kippah. Yeah, I think that's better, ideal. Yes. Other questions about Netilat Yadayim? Is it short? We'll put it in brackets. We'll close that brackets and move ahead with last question.
Can you say something about the different brachot? What did you say?
Not today. Not now. It's not the topic. But we're gonna. Well, actually, the next topic after Shavuot is going to be the prayer service, the entire prayer service, and we're going to start, of course, with the brachot. So. Week and a half.
Okay.
Week and a half.
Last question about this.
Yeah.
Some people say only the bracha, like when before we are going to eat bread, the little diet. They do it also in the morning. I have heard this is totally wrong. Is this right or not?
Well, I just said that we say the Al Netilat Yadayim bracha in 2 places. One is for the morning washing,
Okay.
and one is for bread.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes. I learned it different, but it's okay.
Yeah, okay. Listen, that's why we're here, to keep learning. But I think and there is an opinion that every time you come out of the bathroom, you also say Al Netilat Yadayim. But most people don't practice that way.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, what's your question?
I have a question, but now I got another one. Like, if I understood it well, that means that for example, someone wake up, and it's late, and then it's already breakfast ready. He do the netilat yadayim after waking up.
Yes.
Then he go down and he has bread for the breakfast. He can do another netilat yadayim with the bracha before he eat the bread, or he
must.
He will do it.
He must. Yeah.
But he need to do between those two brachot something, or it's okay? It's unusual, but it can happen.
Right. No, they're two different purposes, and therefore they each. It's okay. Usually, you shouldn't be eating unless you pray before, right? You shouldn't be eating bread for sure before you pray. You could take a drink or something, but anyways.
And my another question is, why we have the bracha of netilat yadayim after Adon Olam written in our Sidurim?
So, again, we're going to talk in detail about the prayer service in a week and a half, but the morning blessings, the custom has developed to say a few poems, beautiful poems. Adon Olam is one of them. Yigdal is another one. And Matovu is a quoting of a few verses from the Torah. This has been a custom that developed. They're beautiful poems. Speak about our beliefs, speak about Hashem and our trust in Him. And some people, the custom developed to say them even before you say the morning blessings, before the official real service starts. You start off with these hymns, if you like. Other people have them after the brachot, but we sort of we collect all the brachot together, the morning brachot. That's our common custom. We don't say them as we go ahead throughout the process of getting up. We say all the 15 blessings in one row, and then we add the netilat yadayim to that usually. Okay, but I don't want to continue on discussing the morning blessings. That was I mentioned the gzeirah that the rabbis made, and perhaps even earlier than the period of the sages, by 1,000 years. There's even some gzeirot made, some people say by Moshe Rabbeinu. It's a fascinating concept that the laws, even from the period of the biblical times, not all of them are mitzvot from the Torah, but they are enactments made by the sages. Okay, we only have 613 mitzvot from the Torah, but then on top of that we have laws made, enactments by the rabbis. And as we learned, if you remember, that we learned from the verse that the rabbis, we have to listen to the words of the rabbis. There's another verse which we don't have right now in front of us, where it's learned out that the rabbis have a job to make enactments, to safeguard the Torah laws, as it says here on the page in front of you. I'm looking at the middle section here, on the second or third line, where we have the list of all the different categories of oral law. Now we learned 3 yesterday. Now we've done 1. Let's do the other 2. Okay, Moshe, back to you for the next. We just did that. Yeah, next to that, next one. Legally binding
minhagim, customs in rabbinic takanot, amendments for the benefit of the people.
Okay, what is that? What is that? Legally binding minhagim. It's a very present example. We all know about it and talk about it a lot. It's actually very late. That's a very late minhag. And it was really not enacted by the rabbis. The prohibition on Pesach. There are earlier ones as well, but you're right. Throughout the ages, different minhagim. That's a minhag as well, correct? It's a negative custom. But,
it's a much earlier one, I believe.
I'm not sure how early it is. Definitely, it's only in the Ashkenazic world, but I don't know how early it started. That minhag started. It's interesting. But whatever, we're enjoined to continue the customs of our communities and our forefathers. So this is another thing that the rabbis sort of oversaw. They created many minhagim. And also then there's takanot. What's a takana? An amendment. What does that mean for the benefit of the people? Here also, we have amendments which the Talmud relates, which go back all the way to the time of Yehoshua and the time of Ezra. Ezra enacted 10 enactments when he entered the land of Israel. Yehoshua enacted 10 enactments when he... What's the commonality between Yehoshua and Ezra?
They both brought Jewish people to Israel.
Exactly, they both brought the Jewish people to Israel. And when you enter a new country, what do you have to do if you're in charge, if you're the government, or if you're the leader? So you set up ground rules. You set up, bylaws. Right now in cities, we have municipalities, and every, parking laws, rules of commerce, all sorts of enactments to make the society to run smoothly. So we have a list of what Yehoshua did. It's called a takana, an amendment, and rules which Yehoshua did, when Ezra did when he came to the land of Israel, setting up the society. And then throughout, of course, in the period of the sages, we have many, many takanot which have to do with, as I said, commerce. They have to do with transportation. They have to do with rules of property between neighbors. Property law everywhere. And the truth is, this concept of enactments is really the best way we can today still use the halachic system, the halachic rules, the psak halacha, and apply it to the 20th century, 21st century. We're going to have to make takanot, because obviously the Talmud didn't discuss shares. The Talmud didn't discuss electronic, property rights and the rights to. The Talmud didn't discuss, public transportation lanes. These things are new inventions, and so if we want the rabbis want us to live by the Torah, they have to make up new enactments. They're not going to make new Torah laws. Can't do that. But yes, the rabbis have a job to make enactments. So that's another thing that the rabbis do. So we added 2 more today, the takanot and gzerot. Gzerot usually are to safeguard the Torah laws, so it's like more of a religious motivation. The gzerah is a religious motivation. And the takanot is more of a social motivation, that the rabbis make an enactment versus a decree. Decree is for religious reasons. Enactment is for the social benefit. The rabbis wore different hats, the religious hat and the government hat. But it was all done by the religious leadership. As we know, the halacha, the mitzvot in the Torah, are not only Shabbat and Nidah and Kashrut ritual laws. They're also what happens when your ox scores my ox, or your car smashes into my car. And the rules of stealing, and the rules of cheating. This is part of our Torah's laws. It's also criminal law and civil law. It's not purely ritual law. And so the rabbis are in charge of all those areas. And so this is part of our halachic system. Categories of the oral Torah to make gzerot and to make takanot. And of course customs that develop, that become legally binding. It's a longer conversation, how the customs develop and which ones are legally binding. Not every custom has to be kept up. But there is definitely a part of halacha, a part of the oral Torah, which is called custom. The last component on the right-hand side, Moshe, go ahead.
Philosophic component of oral Torah,
Agadata, or we talked about it, that there's Midrash Halacha and Midrash Agada. And we said Agada is everything else. So it talks about history, it talks about philosophy, it talks about ethics, it talks about all sorts of various traditions. This is part and parcel of everything that we have. We call it Torah. Torah, the Jewish tradition, the oral law and the written Torah. Then in the middle section, this already you should be familiar with. You should be familiar with the first line. Okay, David, you see all the redactions of oral Torah, that's what it's called. Meaning basically collections, different receptacles, where all these teachings of all these generations became collected primarily during the period of the sages. And the biggest one, the central one, of course, is the Mishnah, and of course after that the Talmud Yerushalmi and the Talmud Bavli. You have the the 6 orders, the 6 parts of the Mishnah, and we have then the Talmud Yerushalmi and Talmud Bavli. We spoke about that yesterday. In addition, we have Midrash Halacha on the top left. Everybody see where I'm pointing? Midrash Halacha, which has special names. I mentioned to them the other day, for the book of Shemot, it's Mechilta. For the book of Vayikra, it's Sifra. And for the book of Bamidbar and Dvarim, it's Sifrei. And at the bottom right, you see here's a page for Ariel as well. The bottom right, we have Midrash Agada. Midrash Agada as well. So this is 2 types of Midrash, and he quotes the 2 most famous ones that I taught you, Midrash Rabbi in Midrash Tanchuma. Okay, we mentioned them yesterday when we were talking about Rabbi Tanchuma, who was in the 5th generation of the Amoraim and Eretz Yisrael, if you remember correctly. So this is, and you asked, David was asking, should we put the Zohar in there or not? In this chart, they put it in. You see how they did, because it's a tribute to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which of course lived in this time period. Okay, now I want to show you.
At the end, it doesn't mention Rabbi Menachem Weinberg. Interesting choice not to include it.
We are taught to be humble, So I try to stay in the shadows. Pass these around. This is my own chart that I made up just for fun. I call them Torah Reservoirs. Places where we have the oral Torah that are, or the entire Torah that is written. And we have different classification systems. We've been speaking about it. It's just a nice little chart to compare them. First of all, we have the Tanakh, which is classically divided into 24 books, 929 chapters. Have you heard of the program called 929?
Yeah, they're in, I think they're at the end of Shmos right now.
Very cool. What is 929?
It's 1 chapter of the Tanakh every day for 929 days.
Exactly. It's a system that someone...
almost 3-year cycle.
Yafeh. Someone, just I think about 6 years ago, came up with this idea. He said, everybody knows how successful Daf Yomi is. Daf Yomi, we spoke about reading 1 page of the Talmud every day. Thanks. So why not, studying the Talmud is important, but not everybody's really up to studying the Talmud. A lot of people that don't have the background, they don't have the training to study Talmud. But the Tanakh is much easier, and the Tanakh is a basic text of Judaism. Why not make up a system for finishing the entire Tanakh? And they figured out there's 929 chapters in the Tanakh, so they called it 929. And they set a schedule. They finished 1 cycle already, now they're already finishing the 2nd cycle. And 1 chapter a day, you finish it takes about 3 years. Anyways, this is the Tanakh, the first receptacle, the first reservoir, if you will, of our Jewish tradition. It's in the Tanakh. Usually we call that Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah. Then we have the oral Torah. So we have Midrash Halacha, Midrash Agada. If you're looking on the chart, you see that the system doesn't really change. The classification system, the Midrash is written on the order of the books of the Tanakh, as opposed to the Mishnah, which came up here now in approximately year 200, where we have 63 tractates in 6 orders and 524 chapters. Moshe, this is for you. The gematria of the words Talmud Bavli are, interestingly, 524, which is the number of chapters of the Mishnah. In the 63 tractates, in the 6 orders of the Mishnah, there's 524 chapters. Just very cool. Okay, so it's actually shorter than the reading through the Tanakh. Tanakh is 929 chapters. The Mishnah is only 524 chapters.
And the chapters of the Mishnah are significantly shorter.
They're shorter in terms of the number of words. The problem is that they're actually a little more advanced when it comes to the content. Most of the books of the Tanakh, stories or poems or wisdom literature, it's not too much halakha, the details of all sorts of arcane halachic systems, including the korbanot, the details of the tuma and the tahara, and so it's a little bit harder material, but it is shorter. Yes. Okay. Next we have the Talmud. At least the Talmud Bavli is 37 tractates, 2,711 pages. Takes over 7 years if you do 1 page a day, but that's just sort of arbitrary. A page is not a chapter. Then, this is for later. We haven't gotten to the period of the Rishonim, but there's other reservoirs where the Rambam, most famously, in his Mishnah Torah, tried to make a summary of the Talmud and all of the laws coming out of the Talmud in 14 books, and he was a master organizer, and he made it so that it was 1,000 chapters, precisely 1,000 chapters. Okay, but the Rambam is much easier to read than the Mishnah, actually. He explains himself in quite modern Hebrew.
I'm doing the Mishnah Torah this week.
That's lovely. I want to teach you that remember we said that there's the system called Daf Yomi? There's a system called 929. There's a system called Rambam Yomi.
Sefaria has a calendar that has
many different learning systems.
Parshas Torah, Daf Yomi, 929, Daily Mishnah, Daily Rambam, 3 chapters, Daf a week, Halacha Yomi, Aruch HaShulchan Yomi, Tanakh Yomi, and Chok L'Yisrael.
Right. All these are different learning systems that people came up with over the years. If you want to encompass all of Torah, to study all of Torah, if you go a little bit every day, you'll eventually get very smart. Right? If you don't start, you won't learn anything. And if you don't have a system, maybe you'll start and stop. But if you have an organized schedule, that helps many people really love scheduled learning. And so when it comes to the Rambam, for example, you said there's 2 options. You know who made a big push that everybody should be learning Rambam every day? That's right. The Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson. He suggested that every Jew should learn 1 chapter of the Rambam a day. How long will it take? How many chapters are there?
1,000.
1,000 chapters. So
1,000 days. About 3.5.
About 3.5 years. Very similar to the 929, right? 929 is almost 1,000 chapters. Also, so we have a system of doing 1 chapter of Tanakh a day, and there's a system to do 1 chapter of Rambam. And his summary, the difference is, the Tanakh is the written Torah, and the Rambam is a summary of the oral Torah.
I wonder if there would be a way, like structurally, someone were to look at the whole Mishnah Torah and combine a few of the chapters together, so that you could sort of reorganize the Mishnah Torah into 929 chapters, so that you could have a 929 and a Mishnah Torah schedule that are together. Like for instance,
I like it.
In Yisudei Torah, chapter 3 and chapter 4 are also skipped because it talks about
Aristotelian philosophy and astronomy. Yeah.
That's right. So like Menachem you just we decided to skip.
Yes,
that.
yes. Yeah, I guess you could make a parallel that way. That would be nice. But also, if you do 3 chapters of Rambam a day, you finish in 1 year. And so every year you can basically be reading through a summary of the entire oral Torah, the entire Talmud. Right? That's what the Rambam tried to make. He's tried to make a summary of the Talmud and all the laws of the sages in 14 books, 1,000 chapters. If you do 3 a day, you finish it all every single year. It takes a little bit of time every day, but that's...
So reading a chapter of Tanakh a day, reading a chapter of Mishnah, reading Daf Yomi. Why do you find all this? To be lucky to find all this time to study, given the modern day careers.
Yeah, you're right. The truth is, but people get so overwhelmed. Let's say you have only 1 hour a day to study, right? Because you're working, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're in high tech. You come home at night, you need to sleep. You have 1 hour you carve out of your schedule for learning Torah. What should take precedence? It's an interesting question, no? That's an interesting answer. Any other answers? Any other ideas? What would you say?
Tanakh in general, yes.
You say Tanakh, more important. Okay.
In general,
You say Daf Yomi. Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's definitely Daf Yomi shiurs that are structured to fit like in perfect time period. So
Whatever
there's a
time period
law
you
that was
have,
like,
right?
I would make all my Daf Yomi shiurs almost exactly 30 minutes. Another would say I'll make all mine almost exactly an hour.
Right.
Mine was exactly 2 hours.
Okay, good. Other ideas? They asked this question once to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who was the founder of the Musar movement. You might have heard of him. In any case, it's sort of like the Jewish self-help movement. He lived about 200 years ago in Europe, and he went around really promoting that people should not only be studying Talmud and the codes, but they should also pay attention to improving their character traits and to, as I said, self-help, right? And to work on your midot and spend time for it. So when they asked him, if you're working all day and you only have an hour, what should you study? You know what he said? Study Musar, it's called, right? Study Musar. And when you study Musar, you'll see that you actually have 2 hours. You'll be able to train yourself to carve out of your schedule. Do a little bit less sleep. Do a little bit less of the other stuff that maybe Musar will teach you to work a little bit less, and then you'll have more time. So it's sort of like a tricky answer, right? But the truth is, it's a very good question because we don't always have the luxury to study all day long, and Hirsch's answer was interesting because there is a law in the Shulchan Aruch. It says everybody has to read the parsha twice every week and once with the commentary. This is a law, so you have to follow along. That's a system, just like 929 or Rambam Yomi or Daf Yomi. But this is a system which is mandated. You have to read the parsha every week with the Targum, with the translation, ideally Aramaic, but if you don't know Aramaic, you can do a different translation. Whatever it is, some people say do it with Rashi. There's different rules about this halacha. But this is a mandated system, Parshat HaShavua, and so that should be part, but it doesn't take an hour. You still have time. So I'm going to go back and say, what do you fill the rest of the hour with? Let's say reading a little portion of the Parsha every day, it's going to take you 10 minutes, okay? Well, there's another 40 minutes, 50 minutes. So it really depends on where you are in your development as a scholar. Tanakh, the rest of Tanakh is important, but Talmud is also important. Rambam is a beautiful way to sort of access the oral Torah without being having the expertise of studying the Talmud. The Talmud is a lot of back and forth and argumentation, and it's quite complicated. Whereas the Rambam, it's written like a book, like a summary of the bottom line from the Talmud. And then there's, of course, practical halacha. None of you mentioned that. It's interesting. What did Ravid ask me this morning? He stopped me, giving me all this theory about the oral law. What do I do? How do I wash my hands? What bracha do I make? When do I make a bracha? This is practical halacha. Very basic. You have to know that too. So, basically I'd say you divide up your time if you have a limited amount of time, first of all, make the most of the time that you do have, and maybe extend it. But divide it up, and it's a personal question based on your progress in your studies. Moshe's answer was unique. A lot of people say the Talmud includes everything, because on every page of Talmud there's a pusuk of Chumash, there's a little bit of Agadah, there's a little bit of Halacha. So Talmud is such an all-encompassing book. All you have to do is study Talmud, and then you don't have to study anything.
Michael, you're misinterpreting my answer. My answer came from the fact that because Daf Yomi is so popular and is so prominent, you will be able to find a Daf Yomi shiur.
So it's also practical consideration, yeah.
That fits within your schedule and the time frame. If you only have a half hour, I'm sure there's someone who will teach Daf Yomi in half an hour. If you have 1 hour,
yes,
just do 1 hour.
By all means, I respect the practical consideration of finding the appropriate teacher, the appropriate framework, the appropriate shiur, accessible online. Sure, there's all these practical considerations, but it's not I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all answer. You only have 1 hour a day. This is what you have to study. Really, every Jew has to personally have a plan of studying Torah and accomplishing in Torah, becoming more knowledgeable, and based on what your background is and your time frame, you have to have a personalized plan of study. David, what were you going to ask?
I just wanted to say it really depends on each individual what his goal also is, because not every individual wants to become a Torah scholar.
That's right.
They just want to become more religious, more observant.
Right.
For them, it's enough to read maybe the parasha and a little bit
practical halacha,
Torah, maybe,
or practical halacha, more like
Musar, and that's it. Because there is so much Jewish literature. Nobody can read everything.
All right.
Everything.
Although we should try though. No, I wouldn't give up so quickly. I know you have to be realistic. Yeah.
As Fresh also said, where do we find the time? Or if we have like a career, we are like very talented.
That's right.
I don't know, architect or whatever, doctor.
Yeah.
Then we should also put our knowledge and effort in dealing with our job, because
of course,
it's important also.
Of course.
So not everybody is.
You're right. It's a very difficult question. You're right, and not everybody has the time. But when you do retire, you get older in life, or then you have more time. So then the question you have to keep assessing at each period. How much time you have, how much time you can make, and what's the best use of your time for your stage of development and so forth. But ultimately, our goal is to study all of Torah. Hirsch, you wanted to say something as well?
So, you did mention Aramaic. How hard is it to study Judeo-Aramaic, or just Aramaic in general, if you are fluent in Hebrew?
Not so hard.
So it's a second extra year or two, and then boom, you're fluent?
Like any other second language, but it's actually quite similar to Hebrew, so it's maybe even easier. It's like, if you know Spanish, you could learn French. It's similar. Right? That's what I'm told. I don't know Spanish or French, but
makes sense.
Makes sense. But no, by all means, when you study Talmud, you pick up Aramaic, and when you study the Tanakh, the book of Ezra, the book of Daniel, you pick up Aramaic. Now, I also studied a course in Aramaic in university. I did a course in Aramaic grammar.
Did that make you fluent?
More, for sure. It helped. Absolutely. That was biblical Aramaic. And one of my papers I wrote at the end of the course is I decided to make a comparison between biblical Aramaic and Talmudic Aramaic. So it was fun. It's fun. When you study in yeshiva, you pick up some words, you pick up the basic idea. You don't really know grammar, and you don't know all the binyanim and so forth. But it's helpful. It helps. It's sort of all the different things you study. They feed off each other, and it's you slowly but surely build up your skills. Yes. Did you want to say something, Rafi? Yeah.
I have a practical problem. Of course, we need to learn, and he told us we need to learn every day for some time.
Yes.
To read Torah, Talmud,
yes.
everything.
Yes.
I don't do this.
Here you are. You're studying Torah here.
In a different way. When I'm coming home, I'm looking what you teach us.
Yes.
And I look it over. And
Review.
I'm going to think about this.
Wonderful.
I want to give an example.
Yes.
We all remember this.
Yeah.
Reflection.
Amazing.
And this beautiful. And I'm looking to this.
Wow.
I'm thinking, what is my personal translation about this? What does it mean for me, for my life?
Beautiful.
And because the day before we talked about judgment.
That's right.
And when we talk about the reflection, the refraction,
Yes.
I was thinking, what we do in life is only we see what we like to see. Talking about judgment.
Yeah.
We only see what we like to see, but we need to go much more deeper inside. And this picture, it's beautiful.
Something,
we need
huh?
to go
Yeah.
more deeper.
Right.
But even when we are going deeper, we need to look up.
Right.
To
Right.
heaven, to Hashem, and to look what is the message before we are going to judge each other.
Yeah,
and maybe I need to look much more time in the mirror. And I will find so much answers.
Yes.
Because my judgment about others, it's, in fact, I'm talking about myself.
Yes.
And then I know there's time to change things.
Amazing.
This is the message you give us.
Amazing.
This is what I'm doing by learning in the evening.
Yafeh.
I'm going to learn other things.
Yafeh, yafeh. I would put that in the category of Musar. You know, Musar is not just another book. You see, a book of self-improvement or ethics. It's actually it's a style of learning, and what you're discussing, what you're mentioning, is that we have to spend time to internalize the teachings. And this was what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter wanted to do with his Musar movement. He wanted people to be internalizing all the studies, and with many different methods that he came up with and that he encouraged. And by all means, you're saying good. It's a good thing. We can't just always be swallowing. You have to digest, all right? And that's part of our studies. That's part of our time that we have to spend time. Introspection and applying what we learn to our lives. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yeah. Which ones do you have? Neither.
Neither.
Okay. Here you go. Pass this down. Okay. So the truth is, we're not going to look anymore. You know what? Once we have this chart in front of us, I'll just point out that after the Rambam, Mishneh Torah, in approximately year 1200, there's another book called the Shulchan Aruch and the Tur in approximately year 1600. It's actually earlier, 1500, but that's very famous. The Shulchan Aruch book. It has 4 columns. The Tur means column. Instead of 14 books, the Rambam he said, I can classify everything that's practical law in four categories. And as you can see, it's smaller categories, but there's a lot more chapters. It's been 800 years, since the Rambam. So, or at the time it was 300 years since the Rambam had been written. The Shulchan Aruch is sort of based on the Tur. There's another book that people get confused, and that's why I'm just spending another moment or so to show you. It's a very famous book, the Kitsu Shulchan Aruch. People often confuse that with the Shulchan Aruch. What's the difference?
The Kitsu Shulchan Aruch is shortened. It's as I understand it, it's a rewritten version of the Shulchan Aruch that's meant to be a little bit more compact and simplified. It contains most of the
well, take a look. The words mean, Kitzur means a shortened, concise. Concise Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, it's the set table. That's the name of the classic halachic work from the 16th century. And then you can see this is in approximately the 20th century. In Hungary, Rabbi Shlomo Gansfried decided to write a book, and he called it the Kitsu Shulchan Aruch. It's not really, first of all, you should know, it's not the Shulchan Aruch. It's a different book. The title's a little misleading. As you can see, it's not divided into 4 columns. It's only 200 chapters. Can you summarize 1,700 pages? 1,700 chapters in 200 chapters? You cannot. It's not really a summary. It's not really a shortened Shulchan Aruch. It is a halacha book, which is meant to be written as practical law for the layman, based on the Shulchan Aruch, but it's a little bit of a misleading title. A lot of people think that they want a practical halacha book, so they go and they read the Kitsu Shulchan Aruch, and then they say, "Yeah, I'm reading the Shulchan Aruch." It's not the Shulchan Aruch. It's a good book. It's a very good book of practical halacha, but it's a different book. Kitsu Shulchan Aruch is its name, and after that, we all know that there's more modern halacha summaries, like Pnine Halacha. Exactly, Pnine Halacha is a series of books about practical halacha, written by a rabbi who's alive today, Rabbi Eliezer Melamed, and so on and so forth. So we're going to now put away our charts, and I'm going to ask you each to take out a piece of paper and write a test. It's going to be.
You want us to give it to you? Come right on, folks.
I want you to give it to me. Actually, you're going to be giving it to your friends.
Loose paper.
I'll give you some loose paper. I have some here.
I need to.
Whoever needs paper, use these. The pens, I left them in the car. So hopefully there's enough pens here. Does everybody have a pen or pencil?
Yeah.
There is? You have? Okay, good. Okay, now I'm going to write some questions on the board for you to answer, but also I'm going to after you wrote those the answer to these questions, I'm going to ask you to make up an additional test. Okay? Here, I'm going to erase this. And okay. Here we go. Question number 1. You can't see that probably. Question. How is the Mishnah organized? Number 1. Question number 2. Explain Midrash. The word, the method, and the books. Number 3. Name 2 parts of the oral tradition. Or the oral law, should I say whatever? No. Number 4, excuse me. Number 4. Who are Chazal? Number 5. What is the Talmud? Number 6. explain about the men of the Great Assembly. Number 7. I'll get it out of the way so you can see this in just a minute.
Just 8 questions or more?
I'm working on it. I want to make it 10 so that I can.
Draw
10.
Draw a dotted line right before, and then put the others. Right there.
9. And who destroyed the temples? Number 10 is going to be.
There's another question. Oh, sorry.
Who built the temples? Okay, 10 questions. When you're done, bring it to me, and I'll give you your next task. If anybody can't read anything, just holler. Yep. You decide if you want to use your notes or you don't want to use your notes.
Or can we use them?
It's up to you. You want to test yourself first, maybe, and then see. Try to do it without your notes, and then. Obviously, I want you to learn. So, if you think you can have a better answer with your notes, make a shot. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to get your head around.
Number 4 is a lot to say. It's good. It's kind of
Good.
It's a little bit vague. It feels the question.
Okay, so limit yourself to 5 things.
Midrash, the word, what means the
What does the word mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by oral tradition? Number 3.
Right, Torah Spelka. That's right. Whoever's finished, hand it up.
Bro, could you move it?
Absolutely.
Is it Biktav or Biktav?
Torah shebichtav and Torah shebe'al peh. Right.
Josh is halacha, no? Can be.
Yeah. And what?
Josh can have halacha, right? Yeah.
From the.
Can Josh. Josh.
What are you talking about?
Poskim?
Authors.
Just write Poskim, just translate.
No, no, poskim, but to poskim.
How to rule.
To rule,
To halach, to rule. Right. Josh word. What is that? Josh. Translate. I think Russell says I will not check from section.
I'll check his spelling.
I think Brown, when you check your phone.
Yeah.
But he said we can check on those on our phones.
I'll check his spelling.
What are you gonna tell me? I don't know, I I'm encouraging you. Yeah.
You're done.
Okay.
Amazing. Please write out here, similar to what I did here, do the Bar Kochva revolt. It's year approximately 135. Okay. Okay.
There's one I didn't finish because I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that's okay. The Israel's persecution started in 760.
Can I have a pen? Ariel, can I have your pen? Or pencil, whatever it is? Okay, I'm just going to mark it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, here you go. We'll take it up together. Here's the pen. Listen. Okay. David, can I have your pen? Yeah. Just actually, give me a pencil. That way you'll be able to see what I had corrections. You done? Yes. Perfect. Okay. Okay, great. Here you go, David. In just 2 or 3 minutes, we'll take it up. Thanks. Okay, thanks, Moshe. So we don't only have a few minutes, so let's take it up. You can hand in your papers afterwards when you finish. I'll look at it afterwards. Put your name on it and send it up. I'll get an idea of how far off we are from. Let me explain to you. Explain to you what I was looking for. Thank you, Amos. Okay, so put down your pen for a minute, Hirsch and Israel. Half. That means half. I'll tell you what I expect.
For the half of the answer?
Yes, half correct, half marks. I'll explain to you what I was looking for in each question here. Okay. So number one, how is the Mishnah organized? So
6 orders.
6 orders. That's what it's called, or 6 orders, and 63 masechtot within those 6 orders, and of course each masechet has a number of chapters in it, approximately 10 chapters. So we get to the sum total of 527. And okay, good. Number 2, explain Midrash. The word means really to derive. Midrash, to derive. The method.
Say it again, please.
To derive, to learn out, to infer.
To take out.
To take out. Like exegesis is a fancy word for it.
Can I say it's an explanation?
No. Not quite. It's not just an explanation. You're learning new things out from the text. Not just explaining the text. Maybe
it's more study.
Study and infer. To infer from the text additional meanings.
Infer means take out, like you read it and you just
Okay, thank you. Okay.
take out doesn't mean take out.
That's what the word midrash. The method is, of course, we mentioned that there's 13 principles of exposition, of expounding, of derivation, of how to derive things, how to infer things from the Torah. But so the method, of course, is using various of the 13 methods of derivation, and the books. Fine, we said there's Midrash Halacha, Midrash Haggadah, and you can give examples of the names of the books. Midrash Halacha, the Mechilta, the Sifra, and the Sifri, and the Midrash Haggadah, there's Midrash Rabbah, Midrash Tanchuma, these things we mentioned, they were just on your chart earlier this morning. Number 3, name 2 parts of the oral tradition. Here what I was looking for was we said primarily that there's transmitted tradition and innovation. Through drasha, learning out new halachot. It's not just receiving and transmitting the tradition, but actually deriving new laws. This is the main 2 parts of the oral Torah I was looking for.
So it would be from Moshe, from Mount Sinai and innovation.
I like to use the words transmitted,
That's a good one.
tradition, and inspired innovation.
Maybe you should name the two parts of your location.
Okay. There's many ways to divide it up. You could have given me an answer of what we had in the chart. Right, there's the purely oral transmissions, Halacha Moshe Sinai, the oral traditions that were attached to a verse, and then there was the drashot, the new laws derived, the inspired innovation, and then you could talk about gzerot and takanot, everything we had. So two parts out of many. Who are Chazal? So Chazal, excellent. We pretty much covered that. The Tanaim Amoraim. What is the Talmud?
Mishnah plus Gemara.
Good. What does that mean? So a little more than that would be that the Talmud is a record of the discussions of the sages analyzing the Mishnah and all of the traditions that were written down in the period of the Tanaim. It's the Amoraim's discussion of the Tanaitic material from basically the
Classification?
The classification used is the classification system of the Mishnah. The Talmud is it's sort of like a commentary on the Mishnah, but it's much more. It's a discussion of the Mishnah and the Tanaitic tradition. Okay, that is the Talmud. What is what?
The Savoraim are not included in the.
So there is some sections. It's very minor, but at first I crossed out. Then I said, "You're not wrong. You're not wrong." Because the Sfarim, they mainly edited the text of the Talmud, but there are some sections where their discussions are added in, and so it is there is Savaraic discussions as well. So you're not wrong, but it's not the very major part of the Talmud. Explain about the men of the Great Assembly. So there were 120. We know that they started off with Ezra, the leadership in the time of Ezra. That's very good. The last remnants was Shimon HaTzadik, right? We know that there were some prophets among the 120 men. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ezra, Nehemiah, Daniel, not Daniel, Mordechai, we said. We mentioned who were some of the members. What did they do? We said that famously there were three things attributed to the men of the Great Assembly: the measurements of the various mitzvot. We said the brachot were all instituted.
And the translation of the
compilation.
That was forced upon the Jewish people at that time period, but it wasn't necessarily done by the. It was during that period, but it wasn't done by the 120. So no, Anshe Knesset Gula, no. No, there's a tradition that he gathered 70. Your pens? Sorry. The measurements, the brachot, and the prayer service in general was innovated by standardized by the men of the Great Assembly. What else? Yeah. What was revolutionary about the Mishnah? So most of you said one thing, and that is, of course, writing down the oral law, which is correct. The second part, of course, is the classification system. He created a new system of 6 orders. That's quite revolutionary. Never had. It's not really included. They're two separate issues. Number 8, when did Moshe receive on Mount Sinai? Good, oral Torah and the written Torah. Yep. Number 9, who destroyed the temples?
Nebuchadnezzar and the Romans.
Right, Titus was the general, but of course on behalf of the Roman Empire. And who built the temples? So we had some confusion here. Herod, it's true that Herod is known because we have the remnants of the temple that he built, but he didn't really build the temple from scratch. He renovated, rebuilt is good, but who built it? They built the second temple. First temple was Solomon, with the help of his father David, who set things up. And the second temple, of course, was Moshe is the Mishkan. And
There's the beginning.
second temple was built by Ezra and Nehemiah, the Jewish people who came from Babylon.
It was very small.
It was only extended by Herod.
Extended by Herod, correct? Yeah, hundreds of years later, but it wasn't built by Herod. Yeah. The one that the Temple Mount, as we see it, the remnants of it today, that's Herod's Temple Mount, but it was originally much smaller.
Then we can't really say build the temples because they were building. It was totally destroyed when then Ezra and Nehemiah came. No, it was.
The Romans totally destroyed it.
I mean the Babylonians.
They mean the Babylonians.
The Babylonians destroyed it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And then when we don't know. I don't know the details of. The truth is they seem to have found some wooden beams in the excavations. They're not allowing us to excavate the Temple Mount, but they have found some wooden beams which are dated back to the first temple times, according to the methods of forensics they use or whatever. And so there's some remnants of the first temple somewhere, but we don't know exactly how much of it, how it was destroyed, what the early second temple looked like. What we have is what was built on top of it. Herod's rebuilding, renovation of the second temple. So that we know more about. But it's hard to, we don't really have the ability to excavate now, unfortunately. Tov. Anyways, not bad. Here I want to give this out to you as a little bit of a summary of the 4 eras that we've covered so far on the red, orange, yellow, and green eras. We're going to talk more about the rest another time. These are some major people and events of the first era, the second era, the third era, and the fourth era. You see, I didn't ask you to name any of the Tanaim or the Amoraim, although they were here on the board just when we came in yesterday. Some of them are on the wall for you, but what I'm looking for mainly is to understand the structure of our tradition, where it came from, when it got developed, and how. And we're doing a pretty good job on that. Bezrat Hashem. We'll continue tomorrow. Okay? Whoever didn't give me their pages before, you can give it to me now. Thanks.